Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Finally I've got another coaching video out. Even though this is quite a hard subject because it's all about trainers, I'm going to try and explain, give you some pointers on what sort of things to look out for when you're buying a pair of trainers. It's not an easy one to do because it's such a personalised thing, but hopefully when you found a pair that you really like, you'll understand what sort of things that you've liked about that trainer. So when you do buy another pair of trainers, you can sort of try and match as much information as you can on that new set, if that makes sense. Obviously, when you first start out running back in the day, if you're not an ultra runner, you could probably get away with one pair of trainers, and this is someone who does, you know, maybe 1 or 2 runs a week, very not consistent with it all the time. And that pair of trainers might last you for a very long time, maybe 6 to a year. Those trainers are cheap for a reason. They won't last forever. Eventually the cushioning goes, the grip goes, and so on, and eventually they start to feel like slippers, and then eventually you realise that there's not much support there and you need to buy another pair of trainers. Then you've got the next level, you start thinking about half marathons, and then you start to realise then that you need to spend a little bit more money on a pair of trainers, or you might need a second pair of trainers. And again, spend a little bit of money on them so they just last longer is normally the next stage. And then if you're an ultra runner or a trail runner, you'll find that one pair of trainers is not going to do it. You need multiple pairs because there's different types of terrain out there, and there's different pair of trainers to get you across different types of terrain. And that is something we'll go through on this video, what sort of trainers are out there for you to complete your running hobby. So let's go into a little bit of a topic about the trainers. So first thing was look at different types of trainers. So we've got aggressive stud shoes, i.e. like the Spreecross 5s. As you can see on these ones, really aggressive studs. Obviously it makes sense that they're going to be really good for muddy terrain because they'll just dig into the soil a bit more. They're not necessarily going to be fantastic for rocks, in my opinion. I find that when you've got a big aggressive grip like that, the feel of the rocks or feel of the ground is something you sort of need when it comes to mountains. And I find that if you get something a little bit less aggressive, which on the next shoe I'll show you, you can actually feel the rocks a bit more to help you judge and balance and so on down a trail. But that aggressive shoes like the Spreecross 5s, for example, are fantastic for really muddy, this time of year, fields, bogs, because you know you're going to get that grip all the time. So yeah, so aggressive stud shoes, doesn't have to be the Salomon ones. There's plenty out there from Inov-8, Hoka, Onione. They all have their own styles of aggressive studs for those. Now the negative about those type of shoes as well is not just because of the mountains, but obviously trying to run on road. If you try and run on roads, you'll get away with it. They will work on road, but unfortunately what happens is those aggressive studs eventually start to wear down, and wherever your type of foot runner you are, if you're an aggressive hill strider for example, you'll eventually wear down 1 or 2 of those lugs. Once those lugs have worn down, or the studs, obviously then when you're running, the foot's not going to be working to its full potential now, because instead of it spreading the load across all of those studs or lugs, you're now putting more pressure onto the heel, for example. So I can't show any because these are pretty brand new, but I know I'm quite an aggressive heel striker. I know right in the corner I'll wear those studs quite a lot. So that means that when I'm running, because the grip's down, I'm always going to be going over my ankle a little bit more. Even though I might not feel it, I will be, which can cause some problems a little bit later on, especially if the wear gets worse. Then you've got your mid trail shoe. So this is something like these. So still got some studs on them. They're a little bit less aggressive than obviously the mud. What these do, they're great for obviously muddy conditions, and they'll still give you some good grip. Not as much as obviously the Spreecross 5s, but they're also good for rocky terrain, because the studs you still get that quite good feel contact with rocks. Hard, concretey, rocky type trails, summer running, you know, where the ground is a little bit harder, you're still going to get a grip, and they're perfect for that. And also you can run on roads on those. There's a little bit of mixture there between the two. So yeah, especially some months, and if it's not boggy, that type of trainer would be better for you in the sense of what the studs are doing. Then you got your road shoes. I haven't got any here because I try and stay off the road as much as possible, even though I have been doing it since lockdown, but I refuse to buy another pair of trainers. But obviously on a road shoe, you've all seen them before. They are literally just a smooth sole. Obviously, there doesn't need to be any studs on there because it's not going to be able to dig into the tarmac, and that's just going to give you, it doesn't need to give you any more grip than what it's already got on there. We're going to talk about heel drops shortly anyway in this video, and I'll talk about road shoes and what potentially problems that you may come across when it comes to heel drops. Obviously, then you've got hybrids. You can get ones that are great for swimming, and then when you come out you go for your running, some more for like your triathlons. It's just the way the water goes through. We've got waterproof shoes. Some people love them, some people hate them. So waterproof shoes, I actually don't mind it. The problem with waterproof shoes is once the water gets into the shoe, it doesn't let it get out. It traps it in there, unfortunately. But so if you're going to go really boggy terrain, sometimes it's just best to go for a normal shoe, because most good trainers now, what they'll do is when the water goes in, when your foot strikes the floor, it will squeeze all the water out. That's the idea of it. It will try and keep that trainer from being waterlogged the whole time. If it was a rainy day, but the trails weren't getting absolutely flooded, then a waterproof shoe might work quite well for you. Some people wear gaiters, for example, to stop that water going inside the trainer. Again, it's a personal preference to you, which one you like. Also with waterproof trainers, they're quite snug. There isn't much give in them. The material's a little bit thicker, so normally with trainers we always say you might just need to break them in a little bit to loosen them up a little bit. With waterproof shoes, they don't really give that much, just because of the material they're made out of to keep it waterproof. Other types of shoes you've got are motion control shoes. So motion control shoes are quite a rigid shoe, so it's stopping you having those movements or those rollouts, so it's giving you tons of support in there. Again, some people don't really like those because they are quite snug. But again, I find if you don't know if you overpronate or not, then it's worth getting your gait analysis check. Get that checked before you buy something that's called motion control. So a lot of people like the name of that and they go for trainers that way. It's not always the best way. Then you've got stability shoes. So stability shoe is a little bit in the middle. It's not a motion control shoe, so it's not that super rigid shoe, and it hasn't got as much cushioning as a cushioning shoe. So it's a little bit in the middle, which gives. This is where it all starts to get confusing. So if you want a little bit more support there, but you don't want it to be so snug on your foot, so rigid, for example, then a stability shoe might be better for you. A cushioning shoe, already mentioned, is something that it makes that in the wording, it gives you more cushioning. It takes more of the shock out of landing on the foot. So if you're quite a heavy-footed person, then, or you find you're getting knee pains and hip pains, sometimes a cushioning shoe can take some of that shock away from those areas. Okay, let's talk about the sole of a trainer. One thing I always look out for is the heel drop, and what that means is basically is how much of this when your foot's inside, how much of your heel is going to be actually off the ground, or how close that heel is going to be to the ground. I find with most road shoes, especially racing road shoes, that heel drop will get lower and lower, something like a 4 to 6 millimeter heel drop. The problem with those type of shoes is if you're not used to running with a heel drop that low, it can sometimes cause a lot of problems with knees, hips and so on, even a lot of feet problems, just because you're not used to running flat foot, especially if you're a heel striker. If you're a forefoot runner, you probably find you'll get away with a good low heel drop and you probably won't affect you. But definitely most of us who are heel strikers, a low profile shoe can be a bit of a problem. And the way to get around that, if you really want to get down to those low heel drops, you have to gradually build yourself up. So if you've been running 10 mils, you go to 8, then 6, then 4, and some people out there, I know there's people out there, the crazy ones who run barefoot running. Again, it's a gradual decrease, if you like, into that type of shoe. The reason why people do it is because the lower the drop, obviously the lighter that shoe is going to be, and also there's a bit more of that feel contact again, I keep mentioning. So especially on trails, if that contact's really, really low, you can just feel the ground a bit more, and your mind can sort of react to boulders, deceleration, downhill, uphill running a lot easier. How much of a percentage does it give you an advantage? I don't know, but obviously when you want to win races, you try and do everything you can to up your chances of winning an event. Most trail shoes are going to be between that 8 to 12 millimeter. So I know for a fact these ones, 8 mils, again, absolutely fine with that. If you found your pair of trainers at the moment that you've getting on with, and you're trying to find another pair that's similar to it, have a look at the heel drop. It should be all the information with the trainer and the sense on the website, and it should make it easier for you to transition to. I know the Spree crosses are 10 mil, so it's a little bit higher. You don't really notice much between 8 and 10. Normally the higher the heel drop, the more cushioning it can give you. It's just a bit more support because there's more sole. 12 millimeters, I don't think I've owned a pair of trainers that have 12 mil, but I know they're out there. Again, you can have problems going up too high as well. The idea of going higher is to keep you on the forefoot, I suppose, and give you again a bit more cushioning on your foot, especially if you had Achilles injuries or tight calves. Obviously, the less stretch you've got in those areas, those shoes are going to work for you. But again, it's something to be cautious about, to making sure that if you're going to increase as well, there's a build up to that as well. So the next thing about soles is obviously what the sole is made out of. Every single shoemaker will come up with their own ways of giving you support and cushioning in it. It could be basically it's a foam that they fill in there to give you the support, and they all name it slightly differently. So it's a good advertising tool. If you've got something that says Cloud made sole, for you think, oh, clouds are soft, that must mean the sole is soft, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, this is where it gets a little bit harder when it comes to comfort, because again, you're going to have to try these types of shoes to find out which type of shoe that you like. And like I said, every different type of shoemaker or brand will have their own science and their own things that they've created to give you the most support. The good thing about brands is once you've found a brand that sort of works for you, I always try and say to people, don't change from that brand. If you found a model that you like, for example, you normally find that most shoe companies will keep that model going, but they'll make minor improvements each year. So even if you can't find the model that you had previous year because they're out of stock or whatever, hopefully there's a newer model up with a few little changes on it, and everything else about that shoe that you've loved is still okay. I find changing, or even if you stay with that brand and that model's not there anymore, there must be something really, really similar to it, because normally with the soles, for example, they don't change the whole science of it completely. There will still be very similarities between the two different types of shoes. It's when you change from one brand to another brand, obviously that's when the problems arise, because then you're changing someone else's idea of what a decent sole is, and that's when you might slowly come into some problems in there. Again, you have to try that brand out and see if you like it. If you like the brand or you like the way the shoe feels, don't change that brand, keep with it. Also with the sole, the next thing we've got to talk about is what type of shoe you've got. So you've got heel striking shoes and you've got forefoot running striking shoes. Most shoes are heel striking, just because the majority out there are heel strikers. So what they do is they give you a bit more support at the back of the heel. So when you take that heel, there's a bit of a spring in there as well that will give you a bit more response time, will give you a bit more of a push. But also it just protects your foot and protects your hips and your legs and your knees. If you're a forefoot runner, they'll also then put some more of the comfort to the front of the shoe. We've got soles that help you with pronation, if you're someone that rolls their ankles a lot, for example, and most shoes are neutral. What I would say about overpronation shoes, pronating shoes, neutral shoes is, if you don't know or you haven't been told by a podiatrist what type of foot you are, don't try and work that out yourself. I always say to people, stay with a neutral shoe. If you think you've got a particular problem or you've been getting a certain injury that you think is your feet, the best thing to do is probably buy an insole that helps correct what you think isn't correct. Put that in your shoe, see how you get on. If it makes a massive improvement, then you know that on your next pair of trainers, you can then be true for yourself and be right that you need to buy a trainer that has that slight strengthening or lift on one side to give you the support that you need, rather than buying a trainer and then finding out actually that made it worse and you just spent a fortune. Insoles you can buy fairly cheap. Obviously you can go the custom made route as well, and really find out what type of foot you are, for example, or you can get your foot tested and find out what your gait analysis is and how your foot strike is. But like I said, most trainers are heel striking. I said go for a neutral shoe. Yeah, that's about that for soles. The next bit is the upper. So what I mean is obviously the top part of the sole, so that's just important. Loads of different types of materials out there. Cheaper pairs, or light shoes, for example, will have a real thin layer of support at the top. What you'll find with this one, they're very breathable. They're great for the summer months because then your feet don't get too hot and you don't sweat in them, so you don't cause yourself some blisters. But I find that the wear on them is quite sufficient as well, so you'll find that it will start to break down, especially in corners of the feet, or where any rub areas inside, they will start to go. Obviously the other side of that is you can get some thicker ones. Normally trail shoes are, because it's trying to get rid of grit, mud, and anything sharp trying to get into the shoe. Obviously the breathability of them is a lot less than those lighter shoes, but it gives you more protection from that. I mean, like I said, this is a mid-shell, so like I said, it's summer, so it's keeping out the low rocks. But then you've got the Spreecross 5s. I mean, they're pretty even tighter mesh on the top, and there's a lot more padding and protection even higher up the shoe, more rubber, to give you more protection. So it's things like that to think about what type of trails. But I find once you've found the make and you found the type of shoe that you want for the trails that you want, that's all in hand anyway. Next one's laces. So different types of laces that you can get. You've got your normal laces that you've always been used to tying. There's nothing wrong with those. You can get laces that are round, like you would do for like a formal wear shoe. And then you've got the ones that are flat, if you've never noticed that. And the flat shoes normally what come on trainers, just because when you tighten them, they normally stay in position. There's nothing worse than going for a run and the laces start to undo themselves, and then you end up doing triple and quadruple knots to try and stop those shoelaces undoing. You've got the quick lace system like the Salomon do, and which is literally simple as putting the cord for your feet, and then you can tuck it away. Because sometimes on laces, when they're hanging out the loops, they can get caught on things and they undo themselves and so on. With the Spreecrosses or the Salomon shoes, they do the quick lace system where you can tuck it away into the sole, and that's not a problem. Sometimes though, some people find that with the speed laces, they do slightly come undone a little bit during a run. And people prefer laces, and again, that is something that's personal to you, which one you prefer. I find normally if I tighten them up and they loosen up a little bit, obviously when I'm running my feet are going to swell. Normally I don't even notice they've undone a little bit, if I'm honest, but again, personal thing. Insoles is probably the next thing to talk about. Shoes. Again, a real decent pair of shoes will give you a good orthotic, so lots of support in there. The cheaper shoes, obviously, it will just be literally a liner that goes into that shoe. The other thing to look at when it comes to insoles are they removable or not? So some are actually now sewn into the shoe, so you can't remove them unless you literally get a knife and start digging them out. So if you wanted to add an insole in there, you might find that your foot's a bit crammed in the shoe because there's just not enough room in there now. The removable ones you can literally take out, put your own insoles in. Sometimes with the loose insoles, which I have found sometimes in some when they get wet, they end up rolling up a little bit. So that's something to think about as well. Again, it's up to you what your experience is of what type of terrain you're going. I try and go for this sewn in insoles. I find with a good pair of shoes, there's a good support in those insoles anyway, and I don't need to look any further. But again, if you're trying to find out what type of foot you are and you're trying to correct those, maybe you need to take those out. So that's as much information I think I can tell you about shoes. I know there's a lot out there, and there's a lot, and it probably doesn't help you to still get a pair of shoes, but when you're looking at your own pair and you found a pair that you like, just don't change. Everyone's always looking for that better shoe, and that's not always the case. A lighter shoe doesn't necessarily mean it's a better shoe for you and it's going to make you go faster. It's very, very minor things. So you need to look at what type of shoe you need for what terrain, for example. That's hard for ultra runners, it's hard for trail runners because the terrain is changing all the time. So you will find you'll have a couple of pairs. But once you've found, parts of that shoe that you actually think, actually I agree with those, I like the quick speed laces, so I need to make sure I've got a pair of trainers that has the quick speed laces. I know what type of studs I want because I know the type of the training for the winter. I need a more aggressive stud. In the summer I need a smaller stud or lugs on that shoe. I'm going to be running on grit, lots of loose particles, for example, so maybe I need a bit more protection, a little bit higher. I mean, the only thing I haven't also mentioned is like the front of the trainer's got a toe cap, if you like, and sometimes that's to stop you from kicking rocks when you're running. We all do it when we get tired. We start to scrape our foot across the floor, and we've all banged our toe on a rock, I'm sure. Sometimes that gives you a bit more support. So again, that's the different types of terrain that you need. Road runners, you don't necessarily need to worry about those type of things. The only thing as a road runner, I would be saying just be careful of the heel drop and going down too low too soon if you're not ready for it. I suppose the other part of the shoe I mentioned is the width for the toe. So a lot of trainers, especially running trainers now, the toe box is quite narrow and that ends up squashing your feet. A lot of companies now, to be fair, do give you a bit of a scale now as a measurement, not just in saying I'm size 9, but also give you a width for that feet as well. And a lot of shoes will make multiple different types of the same shoe. So it could be Salomon Speedcross 5 wide, so giving you a bit more wide foot rather than cramming it in. So a lot of companies are starting to do that. As, again, another thing to look for. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it.